at what we found. It's a big sound in a small town. Far from the bright lights, they're making music every night. Hear what is all around. It's a big sound in a small town. It's a big sound in a small town. It's a big sound in a small town.
Sure. All right.
We should talk about it.
All right. I'm here with Casey Driessen. We're at the Earl Scruggs Festival.
Hey.
Hey. So we'll talk about violin.
Yeah. Well, I got my main axe with me. It's the instrument I take everywhere I go. It's made in 2000 by a man named John Silikowski, who happened to just pass away this last Saturday on August 27th.
Wow. I mean, so you've had this violin
22 years.
22 years.
Yep. And I had, so this is interestingly enough, this is the 22nd 5-string that John made.
Oh, that is weird.
Yeah, it is a little strange there, I guess. That's only going to happen once, isn't it?
Right, yeah.
And then before this instrument, I had his 3rd 5-string that he had made, and I had that from 95 to, well, I still have it, but I started playing 5-string on one of his instruments in 1995.
Oh, okay. I guess this is an upgrade over the other one. I mean...
Yes, actually, it is. When I was at college during those years when I was playing that other 5-string,
right.
And I was getting ready to graduate, and I'm sure it was some sort of conversation sort of about what are you going to do, where are you going to go after school, and one of my teachers was telling me that I think you need a better instrument. And I had never really thought about that. I was just so excited to have a 5th string that I didn't really think about, I wasn't comparing it in terms of tone and volume to other instruments. Right. And then I kind of realized, I guess it is a little quieter, and I guess it's a little thin on the low end. I mean, It was one of John's earliest 5-strings that he had made, and so I got in touch with John and said, hey, what do you got going on these days? Are you doing anything cool with 5-strings? And turns out he had a new batch ready, and he was making some innovations and, or at least developments from when I got that first instrument. He sent me a couple to try out, and it was far superior than what I was playing, and that's what I got now.
Were they all the ones he sent superior?
Yeah, he sent me 2 of them. I think he had like a batch of 10. I think he would make in batches of 10. And I think there were 2 that weren't spoken for yet.
Right.
And so he sent those 2 to me, and both of those, were far superior to my instrument I was playing. And so this is the one that I ended up choosing.
That is really cool.
Yeah, it's awesome. I love it.
Okay, for my fiddle people,
Yeah.
let's talk string gauges that you use, or how yours, because I know they have no idea. Well, let's talk tuning. Let's simplify. Let's talk tuning first.
Tuning, yeah, for sure.
Okay, so how is it tuned?
Well, so it's a 5-string fiddle.
Right.
So it has the top 4 strings of a regular violin.
Right.
So E, A, D, G,
Right.
and then it has the low string of a viola. So it's violin and viola at the same time.
Right.
To be honest, it doesn't quite sound like a standard violin, and it doesn't sound like a standard viola. It really kind of operates in this realm that is just kind of right between those
And
two.
that's exactly what you were looking for. I mean, that puts you.
I think so. I'm not even sure what I was looking for, to be honest, but I know that I was looking for added range.
Right.
And I didn't really have a sound in mind, but I had a range in mind, and this satisfied that.
And probably a tonal quality too to it.
Yeah, over time, like so this instrument versus my first one, I was able to dig in more. I was able to pull more tone out of it. The sound was richer. I was able to pull out more volume. I had more dynamic range. So I think the instrument, when I got it, I was really excited by the new possibilities that it gave me.
And okay, well, while we're on it, we'll veer just a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So your bow.
My bow.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. This bow is made by a man named John Greenwood, and he's in San Francisco or Oakland. I think he's in San Francisco. And when did I get this? I'm going to say it was probably around 2008, 2010, something like that. It's my first real bow. And I get concerned about it when I'm really careful where I put it down, but I still take it everywhere I go. I still play it everywhere. And just like the instrument, it gave me a much wider range of tone and creativity and dynamics. And it made things easier, to have these instruments. And so I can hopefully go farther with them.
I was totally surprised when you pulled that, and then I saw the bow, and it was like, oh, he's walking around Tryon with this instrument.
I mean, I think they're meant to be played, and this is my stuff,
Yeah,
So
and
I'm not too precious about it. I'm not afraid to play them. I am careful about it, but I want to play them and enjoy them, and I think that's what these are here for.
I totally agree. If it sits, or if you baby it, you sit it in a corner somewhere, you do it a disservice, I believe, because they're meant to be played. All instruments are meant to be played, as opposed to, you can have collector items like
Sure.
this.
I think there's a nice thing about an instrument having a long life. I think that's great. It needs to be taken care of in order to have that. But I think those instruments that have a long life and are played, they have an even deeper sound and more rich history to them as an instrument.
They're on too. It's just like
absolutely.
As a person, they age, and so
I can tell you everything that's happened with this instrument at this point.
See,
which is kind of a fun idea.
I was kind of curious how much you've had to tweak it since you take it everywhere.
Yeah, I fooled around with different bridges on it, different tail pieces, different chin rests, different shoulder rests, all the things that you can basically adjust on it. I have fooled around with adjusting, and at this point, I've kind of settled on these various components and have been happy with them, and I have a backup fiddle, and I have since put those same, set that backup fiddle like this one here. Yeah,
that's great.
General maintenance and little tweakings here and there.
That's good, because I know that violin has traveled in. This is probably a segue maybe, but it has been in a lot of different climates in a lot of different places.
Yeah.
I mean, that, as well as you, the violin has traveled the world.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's been around a few times. I think I started taking international travels, in 2000. Right after I got this instrument. I graduated college and moved down to Nashville, Tennessee. And I started playing some gigs with people like Alison Brown and Tim O'Brien. Mm-hmm. And I was fortunate enough to go on some international trips with them on a very early time in my career, early time in being in Nashville. And so this instrument and I got to start to explore the world together.
And is that where that sit in? I mean, I didn't know if you was a world traveler as a child.
I wasn't really a world traveler as a child. I was a traveler as a child. Right. My family spent a lot of time going to bluegrass festivals, all across the U.S. Right. Sometimes fiddle contests, but mainly bluegrass festivals and ones that were known for jamming.
Right.
That's what we were interested in as a family. And we spent a lot of time traveling summers together, but my first real international travels were with different artists after I moved to Nashville.
And then I guess that sets you up for the path you've taken for the last few years.
I think it did. I would come home from these travels. Some of the first ones were Finland, Ireland, Scotland, and England. Those were like my first, abroad travels.
Right.
And I would come home from them feeling really, really inspired and about the differences or the new culture that I had experienced, and of course the musicians and the local music that I was experiencing there. So I was just inspired as a musician and as a person, and I would tell my family about it. I would be very excited about it, and my wife loves international travel, and we used to talk about how we could do this together and want to do this a little bit more together. And so for a while we basically just said I was doing recon for us as a family, which turned out to be true.
Well, I guess it has, but not just travel. You've actually basically taken up residency sometimes.
Yeah.
So I mean, you need to talk about that. I mean, how is it?
Sure.
As opposed to traveling, how is it in living in, and how did you choose the places that you chose?
Yeah. Well, so basically, what ended up happening is in 2015 we moved to Valencia, Spain. And I took a position directing a performance master's program at Berklee College of Music's first international campus. And this opportunity came up. I applied for it, and I went for an interview and got the job. And basically came home and said, I think we're moving to Spain. And so I had full support from my family, and we went there, and we lived there for almost 5 years. And it was an amazing experience to just to have an international living lifestyle.
Did your music change from 5 years there? I mean, did you pick up more of the?
I think if my music changed, it was more maybe a mental thing.
Okay.
Where I was very busy working at this university. And so I came into contact with musicians, students from all around the world, but also professors from all around the world, and visiting artists from everywhere. And we're talking not just around the world, but different styles as well. Yeah. And so I was exposed to a lot of different inspiring music and people through that experience. I mean, and I'm sure that has had something to do with my music, and I can draw some comparisons or little things that I worked on from this or that. But I think the biggest thing is the exposure to the different people and the ideas that it gets going in your head.
The other side of that is that you would be exposing them to what you do, which is for them would be a totally different slant.
I suppose so.
You know?
Yeah. You know, I was always trying to ask people to show me a little bit about what you do,
Sure.
and if they, want to hear a little bit what I'm doing, that's fine too. Or let's try and play some music together and find some middle ground. And that's really kind of what the Other Lands project ends up being about. It's kind
let's
of
talk about that while we're here.
Sure. Well, so after I finished this time in Spain, it was 2019. Finished the school year. And we knew we were going to be moving back to the U.S. as a family. And if I can back up about a decade, I'm going to say that I had a moment with a friend where we were doing a little bit of brainstorming, thinking about the little life goal searching type of situation, and trying to figure out what are the important things in life. And we made this little list that, the top 4 things on my list were being a father and a husband. I just had my first kid at this time, and world travel was up there, collaboration was up there, and percussion project. Yeah, we're fiddle percussion,
right? Yeah,
chopping.
Gotcha. Yeah, chopping. Yeah.
And so those were the top things, and I started to think about how could I tie these things together if possible, and it was like, well, what if I could travel the world, through music with my family and collaborate with people? Like, how can you tie these things together? Is it possible? So that dream was there a long time ago. And when I was finishing up my time in Spain, we knew that somebody was living in our house back in the States, and our stuff was in storage there. And then we were sending stuff home to the States from Spain. It's going to be on a boat for 3 months. And we didn't really have anything we were necessarily going specifically back to. And my wife said, well, maybe we should try this thing that we kind of talked about a long time ago. Would you want to do that? And of course the answer was yes. And we decided that we would basically take the long way home and live in these different countries as opposed to just touring.
Yeah,
them,
sure. And there's a difference. I mean, there is a difference. I mean, it's not the same.
Absolutely. And being with the family is a different thing too.
Oh, yes, true.
Usually when you're traveling on the road as a musician, unless you're doing a camp, which is a 1 week commitment, usually.
A year, yes.
You're in a place for 1 week.
Right.
Or in a certain set of days. Normally when you're on the road, you're in a place for 1 or 2 days.
True.
And then you move on. Right. And that's not the way that it works with a family.
It works better when you can take them, or Yeah.
Well, So what we realize is that we can, if we hang out in a place for a little bit longer, we get to know the area. We get to know the people. We're living in these places too. We're not just passing through. We have to figure out where are the grocery stores. We're like, how are we getting our money? What are we doing about laundry? Like, what's our public transportation situation like? There's all these other sort of logistics of living, and having a little bit more time allows you to get closer to the people and the area that you're in. So basically, if we could, we put it 1 to 2 weeks, in a location. Sometimes it would be even longer.
I guess that's also great education for your children.
I think so. I hope so.
I would think it.
We'll find out what happens. We'll see how it ends up. But honestly, I do think that it has been a great experience for her, and she is fluent in Spanish now from us living in Spain, and. I think she's also very aware of other people's lives.
Yeah.
And, maybe they have a unit in school on life in India, but she has experienced life in India and knows what it's like with the food and the cultures and the people and the places there. And that is a lot different, a lot deeper experience than just book learning for her. And I think it's making her a more understanding and aware person is what I would like to think.
She has been in the places you've been are totally different than the United States.
For sure.
I mean, well, while we're on that too, so has it been hard to adjust to, have you had language barriers in different places? That have been problematic.
Sure. Well, no, I wouldn't say that. Nothing that's insurmountable.
Okay.
In many of these places we went, so we were in Spain, Ireland, and Scotland. Then we went to India, and we went to Japan, and then we went to Finland.
Right.
And of all these places, I guess Japan is the one that had the the least amount of English
Right.
where we were at,
Yeah,
but that we still found a fair amount of that.
Sure.
And in different places in India where we were, the language barrier.
Because there's so many languages there. I mean,
Yes.
there's.
But English is one that many people do speak there. So we didn't have that many language challenges, but those were the two countries where sometimes, we do our best to communicate in the words what we can find, and then when we realize you can't, this idea, I don't know how else to explain this idea, we smile and laugh, and then we play some music, and we just enjoy being in each other's company.
How about food? Has that been an adjustment from country to country?
Sure,
Yeah,
absolutely.
People don't think about that, but it is. I mean, it's a challenge when you go to any new country to like, what can we really eat, or what can we find that works for us?
Yeah, we like to experience the food of the places that we're in, and so we don't mind, branching out and exploring some of those things. But
I mean, that is part of the culture of doing that.
Absolutely.
Whole deal. I mean,
but sometimes, you're getting into a place and they have names for very common things that are popular dishes, but you don't necessarily know those names. And so you have to kind of figure out what are the things that you end up enjoying. I would say that's in Japan, generally you're eating with chopsticks, and that's something that's fine for us, but that may be a change for some people. Trying to read a menu in Japan was very difficult. I'm thankful when pictures are there.
Sure.
And other than that, you just sort of take a chance sometimes,
I mean, it's part of the adventure.
Absolutely. In India, eating with hands. Our hands was the other adventure, and there is an art to it. And my first day of eating with my hands, my friends that were with me, they noticed my struggle, and then they gave me some tips about how you use your thumb and how you hold your fingers and how you kind of are able to get things into the place that you need to get them in a relatively clean way.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a fun experience.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm sure it is. And plus, music has been there
the whole time.
The whole time. And that is, I mean, well, they all go hand in hand. You got the culture experience and the music. And so talk about how much difference, say, is the music in Finland as opposed to Japan?
That's a great question. So I guess if we're talking about those two countries, I mean, we're generally all using the same notes.
Yeah,
right. We've all got the same notes within our instruments.
Right.
I mean, sometimes there are microtones that are being used in certain places, but for the most part, we've got the same chromatic scale. What I found to be challenging sometimes was forms of songs. We have a very, I guess it's predictable for me because in bluegrass or fiddle tunes because I grew up, playing
them. You're right.
But those forms might not be as common, or there are other common forms in other cultures that, they play an A part, then a B part, then they return to the A part, then they play a C part, then they return to the A part, and maybe it's just sort of an A prime part, it's just with the, it's shortened, and then they go on to this other section, and trying to keep those things straight was always a bit of a challenge for me. And then when I was playing with people who were vocalists, it's sometimes challenging for me to understand, okay, have we changed from the verse into the chorus now?
Oh, yeah.
Because when we're not singing in English, which is many times the case, I don't have the distinction of the parts because I'm not understanding the words.
And that's hard because you don't have the music to back it.
Yes.
You have a vocal to match for your music as opposed to what we're not even talking about, as is another instrument to lead you along.
Sure. I mean, there are usually other instruments there, and I am playing along with them, but sometimes I just don't understand, okay, have I heard this lyric before? As in, like, a chorus that is a repetition.
Is this a chorus?
I don't recognize the language enough to know that I may have heard this before.
Right.
So I might have to hear the song a number of times to understand. Okay, here's the chorus, here's the verse, and okay, then I would also spend time asking people what the songs are about.
Sure.
Because it helps inform the things that I might play and places that I might play if I know about the story that's happening there. So playing instrumental music versus vocal music in different countries and different languages is a different experience.
Yeah, I'm sure that's tougher than playing instrumental music because, but there again, you're right. Different cultures have, it's not just verse, chorus, maybe a bridge. I mean, you go to, that would be hard.
Yep, there are different refrains that are happening, and sometimes I guess in Japan we have played some traditional music that sometimes I couldn't really figure out what was happening with the form. Like, I recognize this little part and I hear it happening later and it sounds like it's the same sort of phrase, but the other time it's longer and this time it's shorter. But then sometimes I think about, well, in bluegrass we have the situation where somebody might wait a little bit longer after they've finished the chorus before the break starts. It might not be 2 beats, it might be 4 beats, or it might be 6 beats. And it's sort of like something that the musicians are feeling in the moment.
In bluegrass, this time it might be 2, and next time it might be 4.
Absolutely. But you know what to listen for.
You do. You got the notes that'll trigger what's going to happen in bluegrass. I mean, you played it a lot.
Yeah.
Even if they go one time one way and the other, just because someone broke concentration or someone,
I still know how to follow along on that.
Yeah.
And I can adjust on the fly more quickly than in another culture. Sometimes.
That's okay. You're back now.
Yep, I'm back now. I came back in the middle of the pandemic,
yes,
and I will say
that
it wasn't quite the homecoming we thought it might be, but I'm really, really happy, so fortunate feeling that we were able to do this trip before COVID existed.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
So we finished our trip during COVID.
Right.
But at the time that we started, nobody had any idea that this stuff was going to happen. And so I'm really, really thankful that I was able to have this. It would have been
totally different.
I don't know if it would have happened.
Yeah,
to be honest.
And
it would be totally different.
You may have been in Spain the whole time.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's possible.
Yeah. So that actually is kind of a cool blessing,
It is. And, in a crazy way, when my wife and I were thinking about doing this trip, we even sort of tossed around the idea of, should we wait another year before we do this?
Good thing you did.
It's a good thing that we just trusted our gut in this. But yeah, we're back now.
But now that you're back, does life seem kind of mundane after that?
Mundane is an interesting. Well, I definitely spent a lot of time at home recently. I did take a couple of international trips this year.
I did see that you did.
And I went to Italy and I went to the Czech Republic and dipped down into Slovakia for a bit. Yeah. And it felt really, really good to be back out there.
It felt natural to you, didn't it? As
Absolutely.
Opposed to just sitting home after that.
Yeah. It was interesting to kind of come home in a world that didn't have anything going on for musicians. We thought we might step back into our old lives, but there wasn't an old life to step back into.
That might make it easier to bridge into a constant international.
Well, certainly you got to figure out what your solution is going to be and what do you want to spend your time doing. And I think a lot of us did a lot of soul searching in these last couple of years trying to figure out, okay, what is the important direction that I would like to go right now? And for me, I know that international travel and collaboration is part that has to be there.
How hard is that? How hard is it for you to coordinate musicians? So you're going to, let's pick somewhere you haven't been.
Okay.
Where would you like to go? Okay, so we'll choose Greece.
Okay.
How hard is that for you to find musicians?
I don't know. I haven't tried, but I have a couple of friends who have Greek backgrounds.
Right.
And one is a student from when I was an instructor at the school.
Right.
And another one is a professor that worked there. And so my first thing I would do would be reach out to them. And so you kind of let your web of musician friends sort of direct these things, and sometimes they're tuning you into a friend of theirs, or sometimes it's just like, hey, this is a person that you need to. If you want to hear some traditional Greek music, you got to check this person out.
Right.
And so then you do that, and then maybe you try and contact that person, and that turns into something else. But it really is it happens through relationships. And I mean, there's been a couple of cold calls, to be honest, on my part.
I would think there would have to be.
Some of them work, some of them don't. I like to try and go someplace that I at least have, some sort of lead.
Sure. Because Andy Pond told me about going with a Future Man to India.
Okay.
And he was saying they had nothing.
Uh-huh.
I mean, they got there and they literally had to figure out where they were going to play.
Yeah.
And he said then they went back a second time, and of course they had contacts and
Sure.
it was better. But he said the first time they got there and it was like, we don't have any jobs. He's like, I'm working on it. I'm working on it. So, and
well, that's one way to have an adventure also.
yeah, it is. And
Yeah.
he said, I also think John Stickley's violinist was part
Lindsay.
of that. Yeah, Lindsay was part of that.
Yep, she was.
Podcast. She's a fun person.
Yeah, she's great.
She is.
Yeah, I think a question that I do get from time to time is like, how do I find these folks?
Yeah.
And it's really all manner of ways. It's through previous travels of mine of, like being out with Alison Brown and like that first trip I took, with her, to just reaching out to friends, and also sometimes just a random note out on Facebook. And I say, hey, who should I meet? Anybody got any suggestions? Where should I go? I'm going to be in Italy. What do you suggest? And then that's really, sometimes that turns out some amazing leads.
Sure. I mean, I'm sure it does.
It's a big network, and it's pretty cool to think about how it's all kind of
It is. I mean, it really is. And well, you just shared a real light on the fact that when people say, well, everyone talks about, music is an international language. But sometimes it's a hard translation. I mean, you just prove that just because you're fluent in a 5-string instrument sometimes makes it hard to transition to, say, we'll just use sitar music. I mean, they're string, but they're, sometimes it's not as universal as people think, I think.
Correct. You have to kind of find the middle ground and try and understand, what are the conventions of this music? How do collaborations work? When somebody sits down with another musician, is there a leader in this situation? What is the etiquette that happens? How are the structures of these songs? And so I'm really kind of asking questions and listening a lot to people, and I'm trying to learn through the whole thing.
How much listening you had to do before you actually did much playing? I mean,
I try and my ideal was a couple weeks before I go to this country, I'm going to start and prep my ears for it. But in reality, it wasn't really until I got to that country, because 2 weeks before I traveled, I was in another country, and I was still having experiences in Scotland, for example. So I was trying to keep my head in that game. And then go to India, and, I start to, think about different music I've heard, and I just start listening and asking friends questions and trying.
Do you, when you play with these musicians, do you just try to find your place in their music, or you're trying to... are you trying to learn about their music? I mean, you're there to play.
It depends on how much time we have.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's not enough time for a full lesson. Maybe you only have 2 hours together, and so you're sort of taking some cues. Well, here's some rhythms that I'm hearing. Right. Here's a role that I could fill in this music. Right. Versus if I'm there for a whole day with somebody, they can show me a little bit deeper example of the conventions, that the music would have. So it's really, it depends on the musicians and how much time we have together.
Is the chop universal?
The chop, I don't know. There are definitely people that are chopping on the instrument in many different parts of the world, in many different cultures. Yeah. It is the ability to play rhythm on this instrument has certainly helped me to join different musical situations.
Sure, I'm sure that would maybe at times be the fastest universal thing.
The way to join in.
Yes,
yeah,
because
sure.
it would be rhythmic. I mean,
yeah.
and that would rhythm part is easier than I mean.
Well, then learning a whole melody of a song or something like that.
Yes.
Absolutely. But you still got to figure out what the chords are,
Well,
and trying to remember where they change.
True, yeah.
But I do agree that it has made things a little bit easier in a sense to just sit down with somebody and play and be able to play some rhythm with them. And honestly, when I'm in these places, I like to find out who is, like, what happens in the rhythm.
Right.
Who are the rhythm players,
Sure.
and try and listen to them and try and pull some of what they do, and I'm trying to apply it to my instrument.
You realize also that how many people are out there working bluegrass musicians now learn the chop from your videos.
Oh, I don't know where people get it. There are, so the family tree works like this. There's Richard Green,
Sure.
who started it.
Right.
And then the first person he taught that to was Darrell Anger.
Right.
And then Darrell took it to the Turtle Island String Quartet, in the
Right.
group that he was in. And I came at it actually from a different way. I was trying to learn to fill the mandolin role before I knew about Darrell's work as a chopping musician, or Richard Green's. And so I was kind of developing something, and then somebody heard it and said, oh, you should check out Darrell Anger and the Turtle Island String Quartet. Right. And so then I kind of went backwards and found, the things that they were doing. Right. But it's really through those two folks that, things have spread a lot. So I guess I'd be a third generation of this.
And Richard would be rooted in bluegrass.
Yeah.
But Darrell, that's not really bluegrass. So I see so many bluegrass players playing today with your chop, and sometimes because I set them up, I guess. Sometimes I say, where'd you learn that chop? Oh, Casey Driessen video.
Oh, okay. Well,
and there's,
I don't know where people are learning it.
There's been three fiddlers on this on the show this week.
Okay.
This weekend that I've asked them, and that's what they told me.
Okay, well, that's nice to hear.
So, yeah.
I appreciate that. Well, I mean, really, Darrell and Richard have been big influences on me for sure, and also like other mandolin players, because I was learning.
It is a mandolin chop.
I was learning Sam Bush sort of stuff, trying to like fill his role, but figure out how to do it on the fiddle. And at college, I was playing with a bunch of drummers and electric bass players, kind of funk music and R&B stuff, and so I was trying to apply those things. And so,
also,
anyway.
All right, one other question.
Sure.
Let's talk looping.
Okay.
You're kind of the king of looping there in acoustic music.
Okay.
There's not a lot
of looping done within the bluegrass circles.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. And you're like the king of it, and probably still are. I mean, do you loop much anymore?
I do.
Still do?
Yeah, I don't do it as much as I was. I started this project called The Singularity, which I really focused on that. Occasionally I do some looping gigs here and there, but it's not as a primary focus as right now for me as that was. I still have all my pedals set up in my music room, and I practice with them all the time. Looping is a great practice tool. It's a great compositional tool. So I do that, and then a gig will come up, and I think, I should work up some new arrangement of something, and I'm just going to be me there on my own. And so now I've worked up some looping arrangements of some of the tunes I've learned while I was abroad with my other lands projects, so I can present them in a solo way, but also provide a little bit of the looping quality. Yeah. So, I'm still doing it.
Okay, well, that's good. David Holt told me, he said, I was asking David about his suit, his ham-bone suit.
Yeah.
And David said, it was great. It was really great. And it was becoming my legacy. So I decided I didn't spend all this time being a real musician for me to come down to being, I'm wearing a blue suit with triggers on it.
Yeah.
So he said, I went away from it. And he said it was one of my most popular things. Mm-hmm. And he said, that's just not what I wanted.
Sure. I think you go through phases of different, creative moments.
Right.
I still enjoy it, but I don't know that I am interested right now in continuing only doing a live looping situation.
Exactly. Yeah,
there's a lot of gear that you got to take around too. And so you got to do I want to pay for an extra bag.
Also, did you when you would do that, did you change them up? I mean, was it new each time, or did you have some of those loops you knew what you were going to do?
Well, the forms of them are generally figured out because you are your forms are determined by the mechanics of the pedals that you have.
Yeah.
And so my looper had certain characteristics and a certain number of tracks, and it could fade in or fade out, or it could they could play locked together, or they could be independent from each other. So you kind of learn that box like like another instrument.
Sure you do, yeah.
And so the ways that you get to have, I would say, different things happen from night to night is just one by human nature, and sort of you make mistakes and things don't go the way that you were expecting, and then you have to figure out how to either I stop or I continue with a new idea.
Yeah.
So that's one way, but usually within the arrangements there's places for improvisation. And within the improvisation, there's the flexibility, and the looping. The loop can go and go until you decide to change it to something else. So you do have flexibility in that terms for improvisation, and to kind of change it up from night to night.
I mean, that's cool.
One of the things that I started doing, because you're right, sometimes they do like, okay, here's the same arrangement again, is that I kind of figured out I'm going to, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes, I'm just going to improvise a whole looped piece, and that would be different every night, and that would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I can see
it's kind of a tightrope in a way,
I can see it can be disastrous.
Yeah, some are better than others.
Yeah, it can be very disastrous for me. It'll be, I don't even know where I'm at. Let's quit,
Well, that's why you got to practice the pedals like they're an instrument, really.
Well, you do, really.
Yeah.
I mean, and because they are in its own sense, as much as electronic music is.
I mean, they're a tool that you're using to create your music, for sure.
And sometimes it's every bit as complicated as the instrument you're playing.
Yeah, well, and then you're dealing with power and those types of things, and electronic stuff going, haywire.
What was the first song you learned on the violin?
Oh, I'm sure it was probably like a Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, or a Happy Birthday, or a Boil 'em Cabbage.
Did you?
Those are the first classic ones.
Did you actually take lessons as a child?
I did Suzuki for about 2 years.
Yeah.
And my dad he was playing banjo and pedal steel guitar when I was starting the instrument, and so he was playing those around the house, and he got me started, and he would sort of oversee my practicing and kind of direct me, And
I try to tell people Suzuki is great because it's basically ear training.
Yeah.
And so I people ask me about, well, my child's taking violin lessons, and he or she's taking Suzuki. Yeah, it's great because it's ear training. I mean,
yeah, you learn how to hold the instrument, how to treat it. You learn also learn some technique, and then it was also training your ears. So we did that for a couple of years.
Yeah, that's good. And then, so I guess it all changed when you went to college. I mean, I guess that was a whole different bag, wasn't it?
I mean, I was playing, I actually studied music production and engineering in school. I went to the recording studios.
Right.
I did take lessons, and I did do ensembles and different things like that. But I was playing so much.
Yeah.
I was doing a ton before I got to school. It wasn't really my introduction to playing in ensembles.
Right.
It was more like, what can I get from this experience here that I can't get otherwise, and it was learning how to make records.
Sure.
I like, obviously, technology, so being in a studio is a fun place for me.
That's pretty cool. What's going forth from here?
Going forth, well, I'm continuing my Other Lands project and trying to continue to travel. I've got a bunch of material that I have collected from various trips that is being edited currently.
Right, I wondered if you were going to release some of that stuff.
So I got that to work on. There's a record that I'm producing of a local duet cellist and a guitarist, and they sing and write original material together. And so I'm recording, mixing, producing that, and I do a bunch of teaching, and I play different gigs that are solo or playing for different folks here and there. It's the life of the independent musician.
Yeah, busy guy.
Yeah,
and that's what you want to be.
Oh, I know.
So that's good.
I'm thankful.
I thank you for coming by and doing this.
Thanks very much for having me. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.